Okay, I'm recording now, and Jason and I are discussing actually reading line by line Plato's Republic. I don't know how far exactly we will get, but we are going to get as far as we can. And right now we're just a few lines from the beginning, maybe a few pages in. We're reading from the Internet Classics Archive, Republic by Plato. So we're in book one, and it's Glaucon, Cephalus, and Socrates speaking to each other. Glaucon is a brother of Plato. Remember, some of the characters are real in a lot of the characters are real in Plato's dialogues, and he used some of his own family. Although it would have been very unlikely that these were the actual people that were there, or it may be unlikely that there was a conversation about this exact subject. The Republic was a mid-career writing by Plato. It probably happened. I'm guesstimating maybe 30 or 40 years after the actual event could have happened, because um, my understanding is that Plato was about 20 when Socrates died, and Plato didn't really get writing until a decade or so later, and he wrote the Republic when he was about 50. So this would have been a good amount of time later. So this is probably, Plato's story. We know Plato wrote it. We don't know how much this really is Socrates. It's probably safest to treat it as a work by Plato that may very well contain philosophy of Plato's that he puts into the mouth of Socrates, although probably he was definitely very influenced by Socrates. So they're talking here about what old age means to Cephalus. Cephalus is an older man, I don't know, probably in his 60s or 70s. He's the father of Polemarchus or Polemarchus, who Socrates is going to be talking to more with in a minute. Glaucon is really just kind of standing in the back. These dialogues, they're called dialogues rather than plays because there's not really a lot of action. It's really all talking. And it's not always clear what it is they're doing. There's not a lot of stage direction. It would be hard to stage these. They're pretty static as far as the action goes. So we'll start with this. Socrates asked Cephalus whether your fortune was for the most part inherited or acquired by you. And then Cephalus says, acquired, Socrates. Do you want to know how much I acquired? In the art of making money, I have been midway between my father and grandfather. For my grandfather, whose name I bear, doubled and trebled the value of his patrimony, that which he inherited being much what I possess now. But my father, Licinius, reduced the property below what it is at present, and I shall be satisfied if I leave to these my sons not less, but a little more than I received. Okay, we don't have to look into every single little thing. It just sort of sets the stage about what they're talking about. The subject of money and wealth comes in here and there throughout this dialogue and others. And then Socrates says, that is why I asked you the question, I replied, because I see that you are indifferent about money, which is a characteristic rather of those who have inherited their fortunes than of those who have acquired them. The makers of fortune have a second love of money as a creation of their own, resembling the affection of authors for their own poems or of parents for their own children. Besides that natural love of it. Is there something going on?
Good to go, Professor.
Okay. So besides that natural love of money for the sake of use and profit, which is common to them and all men, and hence they are very bad company, for they can talk about nothing but the praises of wealth. That is true, he said. Yes, that is very true, but may I ask another question? What do you consider to be the greatest blessing which you have reaped from your wealth? Uh, and then Kepler says, one, he said, of which I could not expect easily to convince others. Let me tell you, Socrates, that when a man thinks himself to be near death, fears and cares enter into his mind which he never had before, the tales of a world below and the punishment which is exacted there of deeds done here were once a laughing matter to him, but now he is tormented with the thought that they may be true, either from the weakness of age or because he is now drawing near to that other place, right? Hades, uh, you know, just the other world on the other side. They didn't really have a conception of heaven and hell. It was just, a lot of people believed that there was another world after this one, but they were afraid of dying, just like anybody else has been in most of history. This is the person who's thinking of, who's getting older and getting near death. He has a clearer view of these things. Suspicions and alarms crowd thickly upon him, and he begins to reflect and consider what wrongs he has done to others. And when he finds that the sum of his transgressions is great, he will many a time, like a child, start up in his sleep for fear, and he is filled with dark forebodings. But to him who is conscious of no sin, sweet hope, as Pindar, he's a famous poet, as Pindar charmingly says, sweet hope is the kind nurse of his age. So I guess like a nurse, it sort of makes the person feel a little better to have this sort of sweet hope that things are going to be all right after the person dies. And hope, he says, cherishes the soul of him who lives in justice and holiness and is the nurse of his age and the companion of his journey. Hope which is mightiest to sway the restless soul of man. And of course, this is something I say constantly. How admirable are his words, says Socrates, and the great blessing of riches. I do not say to every man, but to a good man is that he has had no occasion to deceive or to defraud others, either intentionally or unintentionally, and when he departs to the world below, he is not in any apprehension about offerings due to the gods or debts which he owes them. Actually, I said this was Socrates. This is actually all Cephalus again. How admirable are his words. Now, to this peace of mind, the possession of wealth greatly contributes. Now, he's finally kind of getting to the point. The question, remember, was, what, now that you're nearing the end of your life, how have you benefited from your wealth? Like, what does wealth do for you? I mean, like we say, you can't take it with you. So it's a really good question if you think about it. Imagine asking a rich person, let me ask you this, you're like 70 years old or so. You're probably thinking about the end of your life isn't, that far away. You wealthy person, what good is your wealth? I mean, not implying that it's not any good, but just what is the best thing about being wealthy when you are nearing death? Imagine being able to ask people questions like, well, this is what Socrates would ask. And sometimes people would not take it too well, and other times, like Cephalus, he would answer him and try to give him a real answer. Now, to this peace of mind, the possession of wealth greatly contributes. That was the peace of mind well, peace of mind as he gets closer to departing the world. And therefore I say that setting one thing against another, of the many advantages which wealth has to give to a man of sense, this is my opinion the greatest. Okay, so wealth gives you peace of mind.
Now,
Yeah.
he says this is the greatest. What's the this in what he's saying exactly, so I can frame it?
So this would be. Let me get out my little markers here.
Yeah. Yep.
That can be helpful. So this would be and the great blessing of riches is that. Okay. So the great blessing of riches is that he has no occasion to deceive or to defraud others.
And I think that goes back up to what he was saying about transgressions is great, and the time start up in his sleep for fear, and he will be filled with dark forebodings. Do you see that 1-2 paragraphs up?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. See, I can't move this and keep these here, but
Stay focused where you're at, because I'm analyzing it.
And when he departs to the world below, he is not in any apprehension about offerings due to the gods or debts to men. So it gives you, this is a peace of mind. So the peace of mind is that you don't feel like you owe anything to anybody. So as you get older, if you have money, you can feel, you don't feel guilty. You feel guilty. You don't have any reason or occasion to deceive or to fraud others, so you can depart this world not owing anybody anything.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Well said, Cephalus, I replied. But as concerning justice, now this is what they're going to talk about. This is what really most of the book, if not all of the book, is about.
Okay.
Where's my highlight? Do I have the highlight?
Grab something.
I replied, but it's concerning justice. What is it? And this sets the tone for the whole book. What is justice? And so now Socrates is there some weird feedback? I hear something in my kind of feeding back.
That better?
Let's see. No, I still hear it.
No, what does it sound like?
It's like little alien voices coming through my speaker. It's like feedback. Did you have headphones on before?
Quiet, guy.
Did you have little earbuds or something before?
Yeah, I'm gonna try those.
Yeah, I didn't hear this when you had those on.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Actually, unmute it for a second. Let me see something. Looks like it's still muted on your end. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. How admirable are his words. Yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, so he took, remember Socrates asked him, what is the greatest blessing which you've reaped from your wealth? And then the way Cephalus answered, it's kind of weird. It made Socrates interpret him as saying, well, is this what you think justice is? To just speak the truth and pay your debts. So not to owe anybody anything. Is that all it is? And then he's going to give him a counterexample. He said, and even to this, are there no exceptions? And then he gives an example of where justice may not be just paying your debts. Yeah?
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll tell you when you're done.
Okay, suppose that a friend, when in his right mind, has deposited alms with me, and he asks for them when he is not in his right mind. Ought I to give them back to him? So you think here about alms. So like imagine, you let somebody borrow an axe, or a gun, and says, oh, can you keep this for me? And then later the person is not in their right mind, and they're not in their right mind, and then he asks for them back. He said, should I give them back to him? So here this challenges the idea that, at least as far as justice is concerned, and when we read justice, we think of really, at the time, this word sort of meant morality, as well as not just like the justice system like we call it now, where it's like in court and so on.
Right.
So just what's moral, what's right, what's fair, maybe. So if somebody gives you something very dangerous, and then they come back later, they're not in their right mind, and they ask for it back, does that constitute a fair, or is that a just thing to give them something back when they might harm themselves or others with it? No one would say I ought or that I should be right in giving back these alms, any more than they would say that I ought always to speak the truth to one who is in his condition. So you might not even want to be truthful to somebody if they are really sort of out of their mind, if they're not of sound mind. It may not be a situation where you want to tell them the truth.
And I'd like to ask a question now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember, because you and I have had some discussion on morality and ethics. If it was absolute, if moral principles were absolute, or if they were relative. Am I wrong in saying that, or is there a split with that somewhere?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So some theorists take morality to be something that everybody has to follow the same rules, and then no matter where they are in the world, and then others think so they're objective, to at least to the extent that the theory gives them foundation for being objective. Whereas in relativism, ethical relativism is the view that ethics are relative to either the society that one is in, so over 50% consensus that this is what's right, that's what's wrong, or sometimes people are individual or subjective relativists, where it's up to each person to just decide for themselves what's right or wrong.
Okay.
So he says, no one would say that I'd be right in doing so any more than they would say that I would always speak the truth to someone in that condition. Kepler says, you are quite right. But then I said, this is Socrates, of course, speaking the truth and paying your debts is not a correct definition of justice. So he says, but then, so in other words, if Kepler is agreeing that, with the counterexample, the example where somebody did not pay their debts and yet they were acting justly, then speaking the truth and paying your debts is not a correct definition of justice.
Gotcha.
So then Polemarchus comes in, and we have Socrates with the father, Cephalus, and the son, Polemarchus. So Polemarchus comes in and says, quite correct, Socrates, if Simonides, this is a poet, is to be believed, said Polemarchus, interposing. So we've already seen Pindar as a poet. We've seen Simonides as a poet.
Yeah.
And so Socrates says, Kepler says, I fear that I must go for now, for I have to look after the sacrifices. So it just means he has to perform some religious rituals. And I hand over the argument to Polemarchus and the company. I'm not sure what he means by the company, but the CIA. I always thought that was the CIA, but I don't think that's what they mean here.
Good stuff.
Good. And then Socrates says, is not Polemarchus your heir? To be sure, he answered and went away laughing, to the sacrifices. So Socrates is kind of saying, isn't Polemarchus going to answer more or less like you answered? I mean, that's kind of what he's signaling here. So then, I guess this is Socrates. Tell me then, O thou heir of the argument, what did Simonides say, and according to you, truly say about justice? And then Polemarchus says, he said that the repayment of a debt is just, and in saying so, he appears to me to be right. So here he's doubling down on the idea that paying your debts is what's just. I should be sorry to doubt the word of such a wise and inspired man. Now, this is Socrates. It's very characteristic of him to praise someone before he essentially tears them down. Or rather, maybe more charitably, before he offers some counter argument that, what they have said may not actually be true. And it may be interesting, at least to note casually, that they're using poets here to get at some truth, and generally speaking, we don't use poetry to kind of stand in for the truth of life. So, it may not be a fair thing for Polemarchus to do, or, it may not be, well, it may be it may show, a lot of times with these dialogues, Plato kind of shows us interlocutors. By the way, interlocutor is the term for people talking to each other. Inter means between, locutor is like locution, so it's speaking together with people. So
Okay.
Socrates is with interlocutors. Socrates and his interlocutors, um, Plato will often write in sort of information that lets us know that the interlocutor that's talking to Socrates is not really that brilliant of a person. And when he does this, supposedly, this is what a lot of scholars say, that, or some scholars anyway, that Socrates will tend to fit his argument to like the strength of his argument, like if it's strong or if it's weak, to how strong or weak his interlocutor is. So sometimes Socrates, his arguments may not seem that strong to us, but in context with the interlocutor, it may be just the right amount to make the point.
Mm-hmm.
So, so Socrates says, I should be sorry to doubt the word of such a wise and inspired man, but his meaning, though probably clear to you, is the reverse of clear to me. For he certainly does not mean, as we were now saying, that I ought to return a deposit of arms or of anything else to one who asks for it when he is not in his right senses, and yet a deposit cannot be denied to be a debt. True, says Polemarchus. Socrates and says, then when the person who asks me is not in his right mind, I am by no means to make the return? Certainly not, says Polemarchus. When Simonides said that the repayment of debt was justice, he did not mean to include that case? Certainly not, says Polemarchus. So you can see how he's getting around this argument. Polemarchus is saying, well, Simonides wasn't thinking about a case like that. Maybe in general, it's about repaying your debts. For he thinks that a friend ought always to do good to a friend and never evil. Now, see here, the definition changes a little bit. It changes so this is sort of like the new proposed definition of justice, that a friend ought always to do good to a friend and never evil. So it seems to improve on the idea of being honest and paying your debts. So justice is now thought to be, well, Polemarchus, what it really is it's not really paying your debts. It's about being good to a friend and not evil to a friend. So then Socrates says, you mean that the return of a deposit of gold, which is to the injury of the receiver, if the two parties are friends, is not the repayment of a debt? So let's think this through for a second. So if we're talking about two parties that are friends, so let's say you and I are friends. You loan me some gold, but if I give you the gold, you're going to use it to buy something bad or something like that because you're not in your right mind. Or no, I'm not. Wait, we had it the other way. I borrowed from you, so now it's time to pay me back, but I'm not in my right mind. So if we're friends, then you should not repay the debt. Wait a minute. Let's see. I think I'm getting myself confused here. You mean that the return of a deposit of gold, which is to the injury of the receiver. So if somehow you mean that the return of a deposit of gold, I'm not really sure. The return of a deposit of gold, which is to the injury of the receiver. So paying somebody back money that's going to hurt them would not be the repayment of debt. I guess that's what it means. because it's similar to what they were saying earlier. So if you give me back my machine gun that I asked you to hold for me, and I was in my right mind then, but I'm not in my right mind now. If we're friends, then you will not give it back to me when I'm not in my right mind.
Okay.
And our enemies also to receive what we owe them. So you give to friends what friends should get, good things. And to this new one about enemies, should they get what we owe him? And Polemarchus says, to be sure, they are to receive what we owe them as an enemy. As I take it, to be sure, they are to receive what we owe them. And an enemy, as I take it, owes to an enemy that which is due or proper to him, that is to say, evil. So you owe something bad to your enemies. Is this too tedious? This is pretty tedious.
No, but
it's okay with me, but
no. I to me, I might seem quiet, Professor, but that's because what you're doing is modeling for me so that I can go and do this. This is extremely helpful for me. And when you tease things out, that's helpful. Like you just said right there.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting. I never thought about that, Professor. When I'm thinking of justice, I'm always thinking about giving what is good, what is pleasurable, never what is punishable. I see that's something that doesn't readily come to mind.
Right. Yeah, good. So now so you give to friends good things, you give to enemies bad things. I mean, it's obviously, it seems very simplistic. I mean, very, it's not gonna hold as a good definition of justice. Plus, they're at the very beginning of this 450-page book, so it's a pretty good bet this isn't going to be the one that stands, by the end.
Are you sure?
Well, I mean, if I haven't read this before, I wouldn't be sure, but it's called making inferences, right? Inferences.
Right.
So Simonides then, after the manner of poets, and I guess this is Socrates. It's annoying that they don't tell you who's.
Yeah, that's the problem for me. You're right. I'm glad you do that because I don't know who's speaking unless you say it.
Yeah. There's other translations, and we could always change translations. There may be translations on the internet that has them speak.
Okay.
But this Benjamin Jowett is the one who translated this, and he is considered to be maybe the best pre-1980s translator of
Gotcha.
Republic. So Socrates says, Simonides then, remember the poet, after the manner of poets, would seem to have spoken darkly of the nature of justice, for he really meant to say that justice is the giving to each man what is proper to him, and this he termed a debt. Okay. Now, Polemarchus says that must have been his meaning. By heaven, I replied. I is always Socrates, of course. By heaven, I replied. And if we asked him what due or proper thing is given by medicine, and to whom, what answer do you think that he would make to us? He would surely reply that medicine gives drugs and meat and drink to human bodies. And what due or proper thing is given by cookery, and to what? By the way, this is the kind of back and forth and the kind of examples that Socrates is going to give when the stakes are a little bit higher and the argumentation level needs to be a little bit higher because Polemarchus is a little sharper than Cephalus.
Okay.
And so this, if we're going to go far with this book, you might as well buckle up because these kinds of examples we're going to hear about. What about, horse trainers, what do they do? And what about these people? So.
But I think what's most important for me, Professor, is what you alluded to earlier, a few weeks back, this train of reasoning, this rationalizing process is
Yeah.
fundamental for the work ahead. Remember, you said right. So I'd rather get my pitchfork and shovel, and you know what I mean, and really start digging in. Right.
Good. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll finish this one out.
Okay.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
He goes through several things here. And so again, the definition of justice on offer is the repayment of debts to their proper people. So good, friends deserve good, bad people deserve bad.
Okay.
So Socrates says, and what is due or proper in cookery? What and what due or proper thing is given by cookery, and to what? Seasoning to food, Kepler says. Polemarchus. And what is that? And what is that? Socrates says, and what is that which justice gives, and to whom? Polemarchus says, if, Socrates, we are to be guided at all by the analogy of the preceding instances, then justice is the art which gives good to friends and evil to enemies. Socrates says, that is his meaning then? Polemarchus says, I think so. Socrates says, and who is best able to do good to his friends and evil to his enemies in time of sickness? Well, the physician, Polemarchus says. Then Socrates says, or when they are on a voyage amid the perils of sea? Well, the pilot, right? We're saying, able to give good, who is in a position to do good for friends and evil for enemies? So the pilot on a voyage is the one best able to do that. The physician in time of sickness is best able to do that. Socrates says, and in what sort of actions or with a view, to what result is the just man most able to do harm to his enemy and good to his friends? So let me read that again. And in what sort of actions or with a view to what result is the just man, right? Just is the man who does justice, most able to do harm to his enemy and good to his friends? Polemarchus says, in going to war against the one and in making alliances with the other. So giving good things to friends and giving bad things to enemies, going to war with the enemies, making alliances with the other. Those are the sort of actions that the just man is able to do harm to enemy and good to friends. Socrates says, but when a man is well, my dear Polemarchus, and that's how you know he's getting close to tightening the noose. He's tightening the noose here. He's coming in for the kill. But when a man is well, there is no need for a physician. Because if you remember, a physician is someone who's best in a situation to, where was it? In times of sickness.
Yes.
Right. So best able to do good to friends and evil to enemies in times of sickness was the physician. So that seems to mean that in times when the person is well, then there's no need for a physician when you're well. No.
Right.
If you're not on a voyage, you're in no need of a pilot. Well, that's true. And then in time of peace, justice will be of no use. Let's see, that's where he comes in, because the time on those analogies with the pilot and with the doctor, the sort of actions that justice serves is in making war and making alliances. But if there's no war, then what point is justice? Justice isn't doing anything. Then in time of peace, justice will be of no use. And Polemarchus can sense something's gone wrong. So he says, I am very far from thinking so. Socrates says, you think that justice may be of use in peace as well as in war? Well, yes, says Polemarchus. And so he goes on this. He goes on the next sort of thing. Socrates says, like husbandry for the acquisition of corn. Yes, justice is, actions like husbandry for the acquisition of corn. Yes, or like shoemaking for the acquisition of shoes. Yes. So these are positive times that justice is good. And what similar use or power of acquisition has justice in time of peace? Well, in contracts, Socrates says, justice is of use. And by contracts, you mean partnerships. Polemarchus says, exactly. And then Socrates asks, but is the just man or the skillful player a more useful or better partner at a game of draughts? Or draughts? Is the just man or the skillful player a better partner? So you're talking about contracts, that justice has a place. What would you rather have, a just person or a skillful player as a partner? Well, you'd rather have the skillful player, Polemarchus says. And in the laying of bricks, he's tied into another news. And in the laying of bricks and stones, is the just man a more useful or better partner than the builder? Well, quite the reverse. Socrates says, and then in what sort of partnership is the just man a better partner than the harp player? As in playing the harp player is certainly a better partner than the just man. Well, Polemarchus says, in a money partnership. And then Socrates says, yes, Polemarchus, but surely not in the use of money, for you do not want a just man to be your counselor. The purchase or sale of a horse, a man who is knowing about horses would be better for that. So you don't want a just man to counsel you on the purchase of a sale of a horse. You want somebody who's you want the proper person to be a partner when you're buying a horse than someone who just happens to be just. Well, certainly, says Polemarchus. And when you want to buy a ship, the shipwright or the pilot would be better. True. Then what is that joint use of silver or gold, in which the just man is to be preferred? Polemarchus now says, well, when you want a deposit to be kept safely. So you can trust a just person, a just man. So, okay. You mean when money is not wanted but allowed to lie? Like to, in other words, you don't need your money, you want to keep it somewhere. Precisely. That is to say, justice is useful when money is useless. Socrates gives him another shot in the gut. So, it turns out, he keeps coming back to this idea that these kinds of definitions that Polemarchus is giving would end up having justice be useless.
Right. Sorry. I'll be done in 1 minute, okay? Can you give me 1 minute, please? I'm just wrapping it up. Hold on, Professor.
Okay.
Ready? 1 second, little man. Here,
Put him in a cypher for a second, just so I can get his clothes and so. I gotta get his outfit, he said.
2 seconds. Sorry about that. Go ahead. We'll wrap it.
Good.
Leave the gates. That's our professor.
We could stop here.
Okay.
And I'll keep that place as a marker for where we were.
Okay.
And then we'll just pick it up right there.
I think I'm going to go get a hotel room for next time, Professor.
Well, you got a lot going on. That's,
I appreciate your patience. They just don't get it. I can tell them over and over and over again. I'm sorry. You have a good day, Professor. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. You too. Take care now.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye, Jason.